about, we're going to bring the fabulous Jennifer and Melanie of Express Scripts up here. And what's, in addition to their dazzling personality, we were talking about 4 or 5 years ago, I remember first going to St. Louis to start to talk to Express Scripts with David Cohen, and we were trying to figure out what they could become and what they should do. And watching the journey that these ladies and their organization has come through is really inspiring. Not just in what they're doing with talent acquisition, but the partnership that they brought as strategic business leaders to their organization. And they're going to share that with you. So please help me welcome Jennifer and Melanie.
All right, so thank you for that quick introduction. And for everybody who is here, it can't be everybody that didn't drink too much last night because it's too full of a house.
Yes.
When they told us about our time, I said last day on a 3-day conference, we will be presenting to 4 people. But I was wrong, so thank you for that.
Or maybe we drank too much. I've seen double, I don't know.
Right? I don't know. So my name's Melanie Curtis, and I'm the Vice President of Talent Management.
I'm Jennifer Shappley, and I'm Senior Director of Talent Acquisition.
All right, so we are going to talk to you. We're going to obviously tag team this just a little bit today, and we are excited to share our story with you from Express Scripts about really how our recruiters are becoming a critical partner to the business. So let me just frame our story and what we'll be talking about today. It really starts with an evolution, I would say. Our business has been evolving, and therefore talent acquisition has been evolving. And I'll be the first to say we are not done. We are still a work in progress. It is very much a journey, but we think we have made significant progress, particularly around how our business thinks about talent acquisition and how our recruiters are interacting with the business in a whole new way. And you see the words talent partner and talent consultant there. And in our presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the difference that we see. That's the role our recruiters are playing as real consultants and partner with the business, and some steps that helped us get there. And I think anytime you ask somebody to play a different role, you've got to think through, what does this mean for our recruiter talent, right? So how do we make sure that we're upskilling if we need to? What skills and competencies do we need to put in place to make sure our recruiters are as successful as possible? So we'll share a little bit about what we've done there. And then you also equally have to think about, how are you measuring your success in talent acquisition? If you want to play differently with the business, how are you making sure that you're jointly owning outcomes, which we call shared outcomes? And then last but not least, we're all on a journey together, right? And so you might want to take some of the same steps, and if so, where do we think it's important to start along the way? What we think 2 or 3 things that made us most successful. So that's the story we'll be sharing. Let me tell you just a little bit about what Express Scripts is. You may be familiar with us, but you may not, right? So it is a pharmacy benefits manager. That cleared it up, right? It didn't for me either when I first started thinking about joining the company. The best way to think about it is employers offer a benefit and total rewards to employees, and oftentimes that includes a medical benefit, and sometimes they'll carve out that prescription piece and give it to a third party that's really an expert at driving down cost and making prescription benefits as valuable as they can be. So that's what we do. We're also an at-home pharmacy, so we ship the prescriptions straight to employees' homes. So that's a little bit about what we do. We have a far reach. We are responsible for 1 billion prescriptions a year, which means we touch 1 in 3 Americans. So the employees at Express Scripts take their job pretty seriously. It is a fun place to work, but they do take their job seriously. And Jennifer and I take very seriously bringing talent into the organization. She's going to talk a little bit about how that's been evolving.
Yeah, so thank you, Melanie. So I know we've got a lot of recruiters in the room, so I want to set this up and explain a little bit about what Express Scripts and specifically our talent acquisition group looks like. So to give you an idea of our scope, so we have grown significantly over the last few years. That's one of the challenges we'll talk about. So we are a large organization, but We weren't as large just a few years ago. So if you go back just 4 years ago, we filled about 4,500 positions a year. So just since 2010, we've now over doubled what our hiring demand is. This year, we'll fill about 10,000 positions. We are on the Fortune 500. We are now number 20 on the Fortune 500. That's significant growth again for us over the last few years. But for those of you, there's smaller organizations out there, we really feel like what we're going to talk about today is not something that's really just applicable at large companies. It's something that really works at any company. To give you a scope for applications, so we receive about 500,000 applications on an annual basis that our recruiters receive. We're primarily US based. Our headquarters are in St. Louis, Missouri, but we do have offices in Europe and Canada, and so we do hire for those locations as well. And while average time to fill is not necessarily the primary metric that we feel is the most important at this point, we actually measure some other things. It's something we keep an eye on, but just to give you an idea about how fast things move at Express Scripts, our average time to fill for our open positions is about 24.6 days. So it's a little bit about our recruiting group. So now I want to talk a little bit about our evolution. Express Scripts, like many of you guys, has gone through a lot of change over the last few years. So the organization we are today is not the organization we were a few years ago. And so maybe some of you can relate with this. A few years ago, I know when both of us started at the organization, shocked by how manual the processes were. We weren't as large as we are today, but we were a pretty large organization. And so it was surprising to see how manual the processes were, really limited systems, decentralized processes, decentralized teams, paper-based. And so our focus over the last few years has been a lot on, you've got to build that foundation. We needed a strong foundation to build everything else that we wanted to do. And so there's been a lot of focus on what many of you guys have probably been doing as well. So it's automation, data-driven, centralizing teams, making sure we had the approach. And so all of those things are important, and we had to establish those in order to have the credibility to really do what we wanted to do to change. But what we found was most important were the relationships. And so we could fix all of these systems, we could integrate everything, we could move to this data-driven process. But if we didn't have relationships, if we didn't have recruiters that could establish relationships with their candidates, with their hiring managers, really build that credibility, then we found nothing else really mattered. And this is what we really found was the differentiator for us. So we'll talk more, but as we brought in recruiters, we really made sure that they were recruiters that could establish that relationship with the business. And interestingly enough, research backs up our findings. So it was nice. This is what we really found to be true and what we were working on at Express Scripts. And then some of you may have seen, Burson by Deloitte recently came out with their 2014 High Impact Talent Acquisition Report. And in it, they identified 16 performance drivers for talent acquisition groups that really determined how successful their teams were going to be. Conveniently, as we were preparing for this presentation, we're looking through it, and it's like, yes, great, okay, what we're saying is going to be relevant. Burson's backing us up. And so what they found was the number one driver was the quality of relationships and developing strong relationships with your hiring managers. And specifically, this one was 4 times more influential than any other driver on that list. So, for all of those organizations out there, I don't know about you guys, but we don't have bottomless buckets of money. And so this was really exciting because that $1 million system you want, all of the money that you need to spend, that's not necessarily going to be the driver that determines how successful your team is. The quality of the relationships. And so this is free. And so we're really excited to talk today about something that anybody can do. It's free. And so Melanie's going to talk to you a little bit more specifically about what that shift looked like for us as we focused more on the relationship side of recruiting.
Yeah, I know when I first joined the organization, I was looking under the table to say, where's the little wizard that makes it happen? And then I realized there wasn't one. So we've had to build that over time. So yeah, a little bit about our evolution. How would I characterize that from a talent acquisition perspective? And I would say it is one of a different approach and a different value that we're bringing to the organization. Now, you probably will recognize this first step. We've probably all started here, right? And that's where the business kind of sees talent acquisition as an order taker. And that thrusts then the recruiter into what I would say is a very reactionary mode. So you get the analogy of order taker, right? I always talk about it's the call-in order that the hiring manager does to the recruiter where they pick up the phone and they order some sort of warm body of this or that. The recruiter jots it down as quickly as possible. Magic happens in the back, and before you know it, a warm body is delivered to the door of the hiring manager, and then the recruiter waits for that next takeout order. So that's kind of where we were and where maybe some of you feel like you are. I would say that you can help educate the business on what you want to do differently there. And you can also sense what that relationship is like, right? It's limited business interaction, it's one-way dialogue, and very reactionary, because oftentimes, when did they want it? Yesterday, right? So Jennifer and I said, no, that's not what a recruiter is. A recruiter is really an extension of your business line. They are a talent partner. They're aligned to your business in a myriad of ways. Jennifer will talk about in just a second, not only structurally, but through actions that we're both taking. And they create a consistency across talent acquisition that really allows the business line to experience recruiters in a whole different way. So we think our recruiters are firmly there. I know there's several of you in the audience. I should be seeing some head nods now. Yes, we are. And the organization really thinks, now they're a partner and they help me bring talent into the organization. But we have another evolution to make. So that's not, and we'll talk a little bit about the steps that we took to get there, but our next evolution is what we're calling a talent consultant. So now, not only are you aligned and you understand the business goals and you're helping partner to bring the right talent in, you're seen as an expert in the recruiting field to help your business succeed. And how do you get there? You're bringing all kinds of data that helps them make very different strategic decisions, and you've aligned outcomes with the business so that you're both helping each other invest in each other's success and helping each other win. So that's the evolution that we wanted to take talent acquisition in. We'll dive deeply into talent partner and talent consultant. But what I'd also add is, even though we wanted to do that, the business line had some evolution of its own that it was making that really accelerated that change in relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we have all of our grand ideas of where we need the business to go. The business is driving us in a certain way too. So now we want to really overlay. So this is the shift we saw our talent team going through, but there were some things going on in the business. So you guys can probably appreciate it's not, today I'm a recruiter, I'm order taking, and we use the recruiter title. So it's not that we don't use that title. We're more talking about a mindset shift. But it's not that you're here and then tomorrow it's this easy climb. There were some things that we've gone through along the way, so we want to talk through some of that. So first for us, if you go back several years ago, we'll go back 6-7 years, you know, when we were more in this order taker manual place, the business really started growing. So Express Scripts has been on an incredible trajectory. It's an incredible growth story, if you don't know it. And so the business was growing. And at this point early on, it was really, it was organic growth, it was smaller acquisitions, but we were becoming a much more sophisticated organization. And so our talent acquisition team needed to grow with that too. So we needed to be able to not only just fill the positions that were needed today, we really needed to start thinking about, okay, what are the future talent demands of the organization going to be? How do we get into this more proactive model, and how do we get our recruiters aligned? And how do we shift the opinion that the business has of the talent acquisition team today to where we want it to be? And so I want to show a quick video. We're going to include some snippets here from team members because we feel like they can do a better job of telling the story than we can. But I want to show Hazel Cormier is now one of the leaders on our talent acquisition team. But a few years ago, she was a recruiter that we hired, and she really came in right as we were making this shift. And so we're going to let her tell you a little bit about what that looked like.
So when I joined Express Scripts 6 years ago, we were really in high growth mode, and talent acquisition at the time was not prepared to manage that. Hiring managers didn't trust the recruiters, and when a number of us joined the team as new recruiters, we found that as really the opportunity to establish ourselves as partners and to enable that continued growth that we were seeing. And part of that was really establishing ourselves as relationship builders, really focusing on the relationship with the hiring manager, and through that also establishing consistent practices so that there was accountability between hiring manager and recruiter, and everyone knew what to expect from each other. As a result of all of that, we were able to reduce our time to fill by 60%, and while that wasn't necessarily the measure we were going for, that was an indication that we were headed in the right direction. We were getting great feedback from hiring managers, that they were beginning to trust recruiters and that they could see that relationship building, as well as, of course, hiring for this great demand in a shorter amount of time.
So you hear Hazel talking a little bit about that, and obviously we had a very slick production team film these videos.
That tells you how much money we have in our budget, by the way.
This is me holding my iPad, so very fancy stuff. But we wanted to hear it directly from Hazel, because she really came in and she was one of the first recruiters we had that built this relationship with the business where they really valued her, and they appreciated her opinion. And again, she talks about time to fill, and this is again 6-7 years ago when Hazel started, and it wasn't a great story then. It was something that needed attention, and just from her coming in and establishing that relationship, and the group she supported, we saw a 60% drop them. And again, at this point, we feel pretty good about it, and it's not something we really are trying to push down, but back in the day it was. So we get team members like Hazel in, and we're moving really more towards what we define as this talent partner model. And then we have a large acquisition. So a couple of years ago, we acquired a competitor, large organization, basically doubled the size of our company overnight. So we had to integrate these two teams. And so now we're positioned with, okay, so we've got the Express Scripts team moving along. Now we've doubled in size. Okay, we need to pause. We need to bring these teams together. We've got to integrate systems, integrate processes, get everybody on the same path. And so again, there is there's a process where we pause and kind of go through this. And then we deal with the hiring challenges. So I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but one year we filled 4,000 positions. The next year we filled 8,000 positions. And so overnight we're filling twice as many positions as either organization had independently done before. At the same time, we're trying to move everybody down this shift, this partner consultant shift. And so we plateaued probably a little bit. We kind of got early into the stage as a talent partner, and then we were like, wow, we've got a lot of jobs to fill this year. Let's get on that. But we got through that. And we started to know we were on the right path when we heard feedback like this from hiring managers. And so we want to share a short clip from Tom Henry, who's one of our vice presidents at Express Scripts.
I've seen a lot of change here at Express Scripts. I lead our Knowledge Solutions organization, and our talent needs change rapidly. Our talent acquisition team used to be reactionary. They made a change by embedding individuals within our organization so that as our needs evolved or our talent needs changed, they were able to target talent and fill those needs more rapidly.
So when I was talking with Tom, getting some clips from him, he said, well, I don't want to bash talent acquisition and where they used to be. And it's like, no, Tom, that's like our story. You can do that, please. Tell us that we used to be reactionary. But we started to hear from managers, there's this real shift towards, okay, you've embedded the team. The recruiters feel like part of my own team. I'm really seeing the difference from this. The relationship is different. And so we knew we were on the right path, and so we continue on this trajectory towards what we call consultants. And so we get to this point where in our story, the integration's complete. We've got one team, we're ready to move forward, we really feel like we've got everybody positioned. And so we continue down this path to talent consultant. And so we're gonna move off the slide here in a second, but I want you to hear from one more person, another recruiter on our team, Cassie Ward, who's gonna talk about what it really feels like to become a talent consultant. And so this is the last step. So we've got this increase in hiring demands, and now what are we doing, and how are we acting as a consultant so that we can continue to move the organization down the path we want to go. So here's Cassie.
I support our clinical research and new solutions division within Express Scripts, and one of the ways I've been able to move more towards that talent consultant approach is really through understanding and immersing myself in the business. A couple of ways that I've been able to do that is through asking questions just out of a genuine curiosity of what they do and how they relate to the greater organization. I have attended their staff meetings, joined in on their conferences, and set up one-on-one time to meet with them to really understand the products, services, and programs that they offer as a division. In doing this, I've really been able to better align myself with the business and really becoming that expert through providing quantitative data because they trust me and know that I've really been aligned with integrating myself in the business. They see me more as a strategic consultant and a true partnership. In doing this, we've really been able to see through our hiring manager surveys that the satisfaction has certainly increased in switching to more of this consultative approach.
Does it look like they're in an interrogation room? I don't
Yes.
know. A little bit.
It does a little bit. Spotlight right on them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we show those videos because there are some words, as we talk about what this evolution has looked like, there were some words and things that they use. Cassie talked about data and bringing data and the qualitative data, and Tom talked about immersing, embedding with the team, and these are things that we think are important to really establishing yourself as that expert. So anyway, so that's where we are. We're moving more towards that talent consultant. So what we want to talk a little bit about is what are the things that we did to firmly establish ourselves as talent partners, and then Melanie wants to go a little deeper and talk about, okay, what are the things that we think will differentiate us as we move more in towards this consultant role. So the first thing is aligned to business. And I was sitting in here yesterday and listening to Jeff talk, and he was doing the fireside chat without a fireplace with Pat. Yeah, and they were talking about, what's going on. And he talked about recruiters embedding and the relationship building and how important that was. And I'm sitting here listening, thinking, great, this is really, the theme's going to carry over. This is what we're talking about tomorrow. So aligning to the business, and for us, what that means is, so yes, we have a centralized recruiting team. We think that's important. We have our recruiting team that works really cohesively together. We work across the same processes, same resources. We feel there's value in having that team. However, the recruiters are aligned functionally so that they really can get a deep understanding of the businesses they support. Do your recruiters feel like that they're a part of the team that they support? And if they don't, how do you go about getting them there? Because until they really feel invested in the team, I'm impressed often talking to our recruiters, hearing them talk about what's going on in the businesses they support. I learned so much. And you want your recruiters to feel like that. Without that, they really aren't establishing the relationship and the credibility they need. Are they participating in staff meetings? Are they truly involved? One thing for us, an example I think of, is we have a business unit that the way they staff projects is, so we're hiring talent in that's then going to work on the projects for the client. And so they've now invited their recruiter, their talent partner, to participate in prospective client meetings, to sit there and listen to the client on what their needs are for talent, and so that the recruiter directly can respond to what our talent strategy is going to be. Not our sales team speaking to them, but really coming in and bringing our sales team together with our recruiting group so it's a cohesive message, and we feel like that's really powerful. The next thing would be kind of the reverse. So align yourself with the business, but involve the business in what you're doing too. Don't go over here and create products and programs in a silo. We think about it, would your product division create something in a silo?
Maybe. But
maybe. Okay, sorry, bad example. But no, would they not understand what are the client needs and what are we trying to get to? And I know we've been guilty of that sometimes, just thinking we have these great ideas and rolling them out without really getting the perspective of the client. But so think about that. As you're rolling out programs or as you're coming up with strategies, involve the business, bring them in. They maybe don't even know exactly what you're doing. And so one way we've done that's been really successful is, so for us, pharmacist hiring, very critical. Like Melanie said, we're a PBM. Our pharmacist talent is really important. So we actually organized a pharmacist advisory group, and it's a group of a couple of our talent partners with business leaders and hiring managers, and they get together and they talk about what's going on in the market with pharmacists, what do we need to be thinking about, what is our hiring strategy. And what we get from that is, one, the hiring managers realize, oh, we do have a strategy. Look at all the places they're doing and how they're thinking about it. It builds that credibility, and it creates that two-way communication and lets us really talk about that and build that relationship. And so together, we feel like that's really powerful. You can do that with any group. We've done it with other groups internally. You can do it with programs you're going to roll out. But I really think the idea of putting together advisory groups and involving the business is important. And so I'm going to let Melanie talk a little bit more about some other things.
Yeah, so involving the business, aligning with the business, like Jennifer said, two important elements to becoming a talent partner. And at least for us, there was a third one, and that really is around creating consistency. So, but let me pause and be clear, I don't mean create consistency at the sacrifice of flexibility, because I truly believe there needs to be flexibility in every process. But what I mean is that you're creating consistency so that the hiring manager, no matter who they're interacting with in talent acquisition, knows they're going to experience the same level of service and the same level of expertise, regardless. And I will tell you the one thing that I think has been the most critical of creating consistency, getting us the role of talent partner, and something the business has craved, and that is around communications. And not just communications, but transparent, frequent, and proactive communications. So you guys have gotten these calls too. They do happen once in a while, right? But as Jennifer and I compared our notes, once in a while the hiring manager does call and they rave about a recruiter. It happens. And we compared our notes, and it was always the same thing. Things like, I knew where I was in the process. I understood where we were with candidates. I understood the interview slate that we were working toward, ... before I had to ask. And that was the biggest piece. It was before I had to ask. And the reverse happens, where they're calling to complain about something. And more often than not, it was, I always had to ask, where are we? I'm not sure. Bring me some more information. So I think what we would say, if there's one thing that you could do to elevate your relationship, if that's where you want to go in the business, it is that proactive, frequent, transparent communication. And here's the best part, that is free. You don't have to spend a lot of money, you don't have to have a fancy system, you just have to set the expectation with your recruiters that that's what we're going to do, and you have to have a disciplined process around communicating, right? Which gets me to the second part about consistency, and that is with your process. And make sure your process feels consistent from manager to manager, recruiter to recruiter. And back in the day, we probably thought we had a consistent process. I mean, it was written down on a piece of paper, and recruiters were trained on it.
Consistently inconsistent.
So therefore it's consistent, right? No. And then you dig in and you're like, oh, maybe not. And not because it needed the flexibility, it was just, yeah, maybe not. So I would challenge you to look at your process and say, is it really what you think it is? And by the way, take it from as many steps as you have to something more simple. I think there is nothing more beautiful than a simple solution, no matter what it is. So at one point in time, I think we had about 108 steps in our process. We have gotten that down significantly. Is it still the most beautiful it can be? Probably not. But a lot of work was gone into looking at what our steps were and how do we eliminate some of those that were non-value added. So keep your communication tight, your process simple, and your experience consistent. And we think you really have to have all of those things in play before you can move to that next level that we're wanting to move to of talent consultant. So let me just say, if there's anybody in the room with the name of Andrew Mitchell, hey, we didn't mean to use your card necessarily, or maybe somebody did and they know something we don't, and they said, he is the epitome of consultancy. But at any rate, here now we've got recruiters who are aligned, who understand business objectives, but now they're taking the relationship to a whole new place with the conversations that they're having. Because all of you are setting on data that's important to your business. It's just, are you bringing that to the forefront? So here's the kind of data that we have our recruiters now starting to bring to the forefront. Where are we winning in the market and where are we losing in the market, and why are we losing? Is it a compensation issue? Is it a title issue? Is it a benefit issue? What is it? And sometimes it's just you giving yourself permission to take that information. One of my best stories is a recruiter who said, Melanie, I'm not sure why we weren't winning in a certain market. I made some phone calls to competitors and found out they're paying more than we did. That's what we're talking about. The other conversation that they're having is kind of build, buy, or borrow conversations, right? So do you want to build the talent because you're going to bring it, or build it because you've got capacity within the organization and you want to develop it? Do you want to buy it from the outside, or do you want to borrow it because it's a short-term need and maybe you need to think about contingent staff? And I'm always shocked at how little our hiring managers sometimes think about contingent. So now you can feel the difference in the conversations that are happening at that level versus the takeout order conversation that we were talking about earlier. Together, the business line and talent acquisition are creating what I would call really robust strategic sourcing plans. So, Cassie talked about being there. We're there in some spots. We're not there all together. But one of the things that we think will take us there is the next effort that we have underway, which is really called shared outcomes. It's how we're going to start measuring talent acquisition differently. So as Jennifer said, time to fill, quality of fill, still important. But now we want to say, business line, how do you have some skin in the game? How do we have some skin in the game? You can think of shared outcomes as a joint scorecard together with your business line. That's what we're moving to. And to give you an example, Jennifer used it earlier, we do have a business line who bids on projects with clients outside, and when they win a project, that's when they staff for it. You can imagine the angst in the organization. They do not staff until they actually win that project. So what have we asked the business line to do? As Jennifer said, one of our kind of joint scorecard goals is bringing talent acquisition to those meetings. The other one is around giving us visibility to a tool that actually tracks along the way their likelihood of success of winning a project. And we both have agreed, when's the likelihood of success that we're going to come to the table and have conversations about skills and those types of things so that we can proactively partner. And the last one that I would say is a shared outcome, maybe SLA-ish, which is hiring managers, you need to be able to give us some feedback in a certain amount of time, because we all know sometimes that doesn't happen, right? And so all of those things together now help us to create a win-win situation with the business. We're invested in each other's successes, and so we have scorecards that are going to show how together we're going to build a shared outcome of hiring top talent for that particular part of the business. I would be remiss if I didn't say this is not an initiative that HR is mandating. This is not an initiative that consultants have come in and said, thou shalt. This is something we're doing on our own. So don't think that you need that. We just took the opportunity with one part of the business to say, how do we jointly create success together? But that's not the only thing that's going to create our success.
Absolutely. So in thinking through, where do you have those consulting relationships? Having those consulting relationships allow us to start talking about creating shared outcomes. So we really say, so we've talked a lot about recruiters and what do recruiters need. So we want to remind leaders here, because I know we have a lot of teams, a lot of leaders of talent acquisition groups here. It's not just on your recruiters to build those relationships. Leaders, you've got to have the relationships that your teams need to help and enable them to get the work done. So there is a responsibility here too. And so leaders, you need to have the relationships at the right levels, throughout your organization to make sure your team has got the credibility they need. And so that, ask for feedback. Don't wait on it. Don't sit in your office analyzing and poring over data and thinking you're doing such a great job. Reach out to the business, find out what they think you're doing. Just having those conversations alone, I've found, has really enabled us to build those relationships at the top of the house. And then talk about your strategy and capabilities. I don't know about you guys, but we're doing things now that we weren't doing a few years ago. And the business doesn't know about it. They don't know about your new resources. They don't know about the reach and the skill set you have. So make sure you're talking about it. If you don't tell the business how to engage you in a new way, they're going to continue engaging your team in the old way, the way they know how. And that might be the order taker mentality, and that's not what we want to drive. So that's important as well. And so real briefly, we do want to talk about what does this mean for recruiter talent. So one thing we did, so we knew this meant we needed to look at the skills on our recruiter team differently. And so we went through a competency exercise where we actually took some of our high-performing team members and said, what is it that differentiates you? And through that, we identified what key competencies we needed to select for. And so those are part of our interview guide. We look at them in our selection criteria, and these will be used as we drive going forward what new team members we're bringing in. And then the other piece of that is what you can develop. So you really need to know what competencies do you need on your recruiting team to achieve these goals and to really move into this consultant model. And then hopefully you have great OD partners who can help you identify what you can select for or what you need to select for, and then what can be developed. And the good news is the building trust and strategic relationships that we've talked about can be developed. And we're putting together Recruiter University. This was our first year, our first pilot with it, that we're now rolling forward. And this is something that we're going to use to make sure that we're developing this in our team members going forward. So Melanie's going to talk to you a little bit more just to wrap up on, okay, what can you do to get this started? Where do you start?
Yep. So I said it was a journey. Ours is not over quite yet, but if there are a couple of things that we would suggest along the way, one, building the foundation, it's knocking on the door and asking to be let into a staff meeting or learn more about their business. I've never seen a leader turn somebody away that says, I want to learn more about your business. And the second one is that consistent, proactive communication. I think identifying if you want recruiters to play in a different space with a partnership, how do you set them up for success from a competency perspective? Where do you help develop? And the last one is measure something that's important to the business. One thing, find out what it is. Even if you don't have a joint shared scorecard, measure one thing that they say is important and start showing them how you're adding value to that. So we will end with thank you for listening. That is our story, and we wish you luck in writing the next chapter of yours. Thank you.